Greetings, Iain from RTO here. Welcome to another week. It's Bank Holiday Monday, and as in the UK, you mention the word bank holiday and it rains, and it is raining. It's not very nice out there, and it's very dark and dingy. But I've got some good 80s American heavy metal rock and roll for you today, and it's a viewer's request. And it's from a young lad called the Rock Beast. He asked for this a long time ago, and it's finally come to the top of the list. So I hope you enjoy this. And the band he's asked for is Mötley Crüe, which is quite apt at the moment because there's that big court thing coming up with Mick Mars and lots of accusations being thrown around. They decided to not want to tour any more, and they got in John 5, and it's all become a little bit messy. But let's have a look at the music they did. I mean, they were formed by Nikki Sixx and Tommy Lee, Mick Mars and Vince Neil. They've sold over 100 million albums worldwide, 7 multi-platinum certifications, 9 top 10 albums on the American Billboard. And they're still going now. There's that thing, should they pack in or not? But they said they're strictly a touring band now. And of course Mick Mars retired on the 26th of October 2022. Now they have released 9 albums. Now I'm of my sort of thing with Mötley Crüe. I do prefer their earlier stuff than the later stuff. And you'll probably find a lot of old Mötley Crüe fans feel the same. So we'll have a look at these 9 albums. So coming in at number 9, we have the 7th album that was released in 1997, and it's called Generation Swine. It was the last to feature Tommy Lee until 2008, and it's probably the worst to cover from I've seen in a month of Sundays on here. So it's the classic lineup: Vince Neil, Mick Mars, Nikki Sixx and Tommy Lee. We've got additionals on here. We've got John Coraby on rhythm guitar, Dave Darling on rhythm guitar, Susie Katamar on cello, strings around by Bennett Sarv, and David Panch plays piano. We've got synthesizer of Scott Humphrey, Gunnar Sixx, which is Nikki Sixx's son, on extra vocals, and Rick Nielsen and Boris Zander on backing vocals of Glitter. So the first track on this one is called Find Myself. Oh dear. Poor old Vince Neil's voice, it's absolutely shot to pieces, isn't it? It's not very good. There's lots of swearing on it. I find it a little bit, yeah. The second track is called Afraid. I like Nikki Sixx's bass line on this, some great guitar work from Mick Mars, but it just lacks something. Flush, nothing wrong with this, it's just not memorable. The title track, Generation Swine, very generic rock music, nothing special. Confessions, not one of the best tracks on the album, I don't really like it. Beauty, it's alright, it's one of the better songs on the album. Glitter, if they're just going through the motions here, it's pretty poor. Then we get my favourite track. It's 1 minute and 50 seconds, shortest track on the album, but it's the best thing. It's got some good guitar work from Mick Mars, and Tommy just sounds great on this. Let Us Pray, it's not very good. Trying to be a more heavier metal band, and it just doesn't really work for me. They're not that sort of metal. Rocket Ship, not very good again. I think Vince Neil's vocal performance is groggy. A Rat Like Me, it's not too bad, quite listenable. Shout at the Devil 97, why do they need to do another version of one of their classics because it doesn't sound right. Vince just can't sing it anymore. Simple as. Brandon the Terrible. It's just rubbish. There's only a couple of things on this album worth listening to. The rest of it is pretty poor, I think. And generally, a lot of Mötley Crüe fans feel the same. So I'm going to give this an RTO ranking of 3 out of 10. Coming in at number 8, we have the 6th album. It was released in 1994, and it's the only band's album released with singer John Coraby, although he did play on Generation's Swine. And it was their first album of new material to be released since 1989. So we've got John Coraby on lead vocals and guitars, Mick Mars, Nikki Sixx and Tommy Lee. Guest musicians on here. Scott Humphrey programming in synths. That word programming always sends shudders. Glenn Hughes does the backing vocals on Misunderstood. Mark Lofrance and Dave Steele backing vocals. Hook Herrer on harmonica. Sammy Sanchez on the mandolin. And Vancouver Symphony Orchestra. Power to the music. John's voice is great on this. It's the best track on the album. It's a really strong song. I like that one. Uncle Jack is a little bit mediocre. It's not too bad. Hooligan's Holiday. It's not a bad song. Good vocal from John. I don't mind that track. Misunderstood. It's alright. Love Shine. It's alright again. It's nothing thing. Poison Apples is a solid rock song. I do like that song. Really good. Hammered, it's got a great guitar solo in it by Mick Mars. Not a bad little track either. Death to Us Part, solid. Just good old fashioned rock. Welcome to the Numb, not too bad. Smoke in the Sky, it doesn't do anything for me. Dropping Like Flames, too long, doesn't do anything for me. And Drift Away, it's a mixed bag of track. It's got some good points and it's got some bad points. This one isn't too bad. I think John's vocals are pretty good on it. I think they play well. There's some great guitar licks from Mick, but it's an album I don't listen to very much. So I'm going to give this one an RTO ranking of 5.5. Okay then, coming in at number 7. It's the 7th and most current and probably the last. Saints of Los Angeles, and it was released in 2008. It's the return of Tommy Lee on drums. Additionals on here, we've got James Michael on keyboards, Marty Fredriksson on Melissa Harney backing vocals, Josh Tob Jabby, Shatix and James Mitchell at the choir on the Saints of Los Angeles. First track is called LAMF. Just a little intro welcoming people to Los Angeles. Next track is called Face in the Dirt, my favourite track on this. Musically, the band really are on top of the game, but it's Vince's vocals that are a little bit short, but it's still an enjoyable track. What's It Gonna Take? Not keen on this one at all. Vince Neil's voice just sounds horrible. Down at the Whiskey, a song about the Whiskey a Go-Go. It's a really good song, but again, it's Vince Neil's vocal. He's struggling a bit. Saints of Los Angeles, typical Mötley Crüe track, sounds really good. Even Vince Neil sounds good on this. I think he's carried though by the choir. Excuse my French in this. The track's called Motherfucker of the Year. I don't want to. There was this singing by a bunch of middle-aged men. Doesn't do anything for me. If they'd have done it in 1983, yeah, you can do it, but not when you're getting older. Doesn't sound right. The Animal in Me, really shortcut, but Vince Neil's vocals are shot to death. Welcome to the Machine. It's alright. Just Another Psycho, solid enough track, great. The playing's great. It's just the vocals that let it down a little bit. Chicks equals trouble. Back in the day, again, this would have sounded good if they'd have recorded it in the 80s. But, you know, these are middle-aged men. You know, they're not going to be, you know, nah, there's something a bit creepy about that one. This ain't a love song. Mick Mars's riffs are solid in this. I don't see the point of all the swearing on the track, though. White Trash Circus. I think Mick, Nicky and Tom sound great. Vince is not at the top of his game. Going Out Swinging, it's alright. Musically, this album sounds brilliant. It's well produced. The guys haven't lost the touch. Tommy sounds great on the drums. Good drummer as ever. But Vince Neil has lost it. I don't think he's looked after his voice. And the other thing I don't want to hear is men in the late 50s, early 60s singing and writing songs about 20-year-old girls. It just doesn't seem right. You know, they cannot be dating girls of that age anymore. So I'm going to give this an RTO ranking of 6 out of 10. Okay then, coming in at number 6, we have the 8th album released in 2000 and it's called New Tattoo. This is the one without Tommy Lee Jones, and they brought in Randy Castillo of Ozzy Osbourne's band to do the drums. So with Randy it's Nicky, Mick and Vince. Hell on Heels, this is quite good. So it's got that real distinctive Mötley Crüe sound and it's not a bad track. Treat Me Like the Dog I Am, love the riffs here from Mick. Great little track, even Vince sounds alright on that. New Tattoo. Honestly, I think Vince Neil should stay away from ballads now. Well, he should stay away from singing full stop in my opinion, but he just hasn't got the vocal to do ballads anymore like he did in the day. But Mick Mars's guitar work on this is fantastic. Drag Strip Superstar, this is great. This is Mötley Crüe evolved. Even Vince sounds great on this. It's a solid track. Best one on the album. First Band on the Moon. I love Nicky Sixx's bass line on it. It really drives it. And Randy's drumming on this. I mean, he's a great drummer. Drummed with Ozzy for a few years, he did. And it's a good replacement for Tommy Lee. She Needs Rock and Roll. Another really good track. Excellent guitar riffs on here. Solid track. Punched in the Teeth by Love, a really good track. Mick Mars, absolutely on fire. Hollywood Ending, it's not a bad song. Even the semi-acoustic sound, even Vince sounds pretty good on this. We got Fake, another really good track. Great riffs on this. Proper sort of Mötley Crüe. There's a little bit of chanting on it, a bit cheesy, but you know it's Mötley Crüe. Porno Star, it's alright. Then they do a cover of the Tubes' White Punks on Dope. It's not a bad version of the song so I quite like that. Time Bomb, not very good. Okay, of the newer Mötley Crüe albums, I think this is the best one actually. It's just Vince's vocals are not too bad on this, and it's not a bad listen, so I'm going to give it an RTO ranking of 6.5. Okay, now we get into the stuff that I sort of got into back in the day, and it's the stuff that I still like listening to today. So coming in at number 5, we have the debut album from 1981, Too Fast for Love. It's the classic lineup: Vince Neil, Mick Mars and Nicky Sixx, Tommy Lee. So first track, Livewire. Oh, what a track. Really raw, some great drumming from Tommy. Good start to the album. Public Enemy number 1. Nikki Sixx's bass line is just really good. Take Me to the Top, just a great heavy metal rock and roll track. Some great riffs. Vince sounds great on this. Merry Go Round, not the best song on the album, probably the weakest one. Piece of Your Action, it's got some of the best riffs on the album from Mick Mars, absolutely great. Then we get my favourite track on here, Starry Eyes. It's just great rock and roll, brilliant stuff. Heavy metal rock and roll, as they call it. Stick to Your Guns, another really good track, solid stuff on that as well. Come On and Dance, good thing about that is the drumming. Nicky's bass line and Tommy's drumming are brilliant on that. Too Fast for Love, I love the rawness of that, great track. On With the Show, not the best track on the album, but it's there. I like this album. It's got some rawness on it. It's got some good licks, so I shall give this an RTO ranking of 6.6. Okay, coming in at number 4, we've got the 5th album from 1989, Dr. Feelgood. Joining the band on here we have Bob Rock, who plays bass on Time for Change, backing vocals on Dr. Feelgood as well. John Webster plays the honky tonk piano on Rattlesnake Shake and keyboards. Tommy Keenslide plays horns with Iain Putz, Ross McGregory and Henry Christensen. Backing vocals Donna McDaniel, Emmy Canyon and Mark LaFrance, David Steele. Steven Tyler appears on this. Does a little bit of vocals on Sticky Sweet. Brian Adams does a Sticky Sweet vocals as well. Jack Blades as well. We've got Skid Row, Bob Dowd and Toby Francis doing the Time for Change backing vocals. Really interesting people on this one, isn't there? So the first track is called TNT, Terror in Tinseltown. It's just a little intro, and then it goes into the brilliant Dr. Feelgood, one of the best songs Mötley Crüe ever did. Love Tommy's drumming on this, just good old proper rock, great track. Slice of Your Pie, another bright track, really good, love that track. Rattlesnake Shake, just great track, really like that one, just good old fashioned heavy metal mark, rock and roll. Kickstart My Heart, a classic, again one of the best songs they ever did. The heavy engine riffs at the beginning, brilliant track. Without You, an awful ballad. Don't like that. Same Old Situation, SOS, love this track, just pure sort of 80s rock, good stuff. Sticky Sweet, the lyrics are a bit weird, but it's a good song. Then we got She Goes Down, just a bit of a filler. The lyrics are quite crude, not very into that. Don't Go Away, It's Okay, and Time for Change, another cheesy ballad. I'd say this is the last of the classic albums of Mötley Crüe. I like playing this album, it's just a gritty rock album. And I'll give this an RTO ranking of 7 out of 10. Coming in at number 3, we have the 3rd album from 1985, Theatre of Pain. This, of course, was released after the aftermath of lead vocalist Vince Neil's arrest for manslaughter on a drunk drive. The album marked the beginning of the band's transition from the traditional heavy metal sound of Too Fast to Love towards more glam metal. Joining the boys here, we have Jay Winding on keyboards, Max Carl and John Batoff on vocals, and Tom Warman on percussion. City Boy Blues, overproduced and clean. Then we get a cover they did, the Brownville Station cover of Smoking in the Boys' Room, which is probably the best track on this album. I love that song, and they do a really good version of that. Louder Than Hell, a typical overproduced 80s rock song, but it's quite good. Keep your eye on the money. Just glammy rock stuff, it's alright. Home Sweet Home, I didn't like it when it came out. I still don't. Tonight We Need a Lover, good track. Okay, it's got that 80s production, but it's got a really great riff from Mick on that. Use It or Lose It, again, it's Mick Mars's guitars. It's great. Save Our Souls, just a mid-80s rock track, nothing wrong with that one. Raise Your Hands to Rock, yeah, really good track. Gets you in the groove of the 80s. I was what? How old was I then? About 19, so I loved all this sort of stuff. And Fight for Your Rights, same old, same old. Lots of that. Okay, it's a very solid album. It is very 80s, but it's still great. I love Tommy's drums in this. Very popular album when this came out, and I did play it a lot. So I'm going to give it an RTO ranking of 7.5. Okay, coming in at number 2. The fourth album from 87, Girls, Girls, Girls. There's lots of people that pop in for backing vocals on this. Bob Carlyle, Dave Amato, John Purdell, Pat Torpey, Phillison Street James, Tommy Fernbank. First track on here is Wild Side, one of my favourite tracks. I just love this, and I remember the video to this when Tommy Lee goes up in the drum cage and it turns upside down. Not a bad track, love that track. Then we get Girls, 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 some nice riffs on this. It's a really good, dirty, grungy riff there, brilliant track. Dancing on Glass, very 80s, not one of my favourite tracks on this one. Bad Boy Boogie, nothing to do with AC/DC, but it's a little bit of boogie rock and it's pretty good. Then we get this little short track called Nona, one of them pointless bits of music. 5 Years Dead, nice track, really good. Then we get All in the Name Of, just great little rock and roll track. Actually some nice drumming from Tommy on that, excellent. Something for Nothing, solid generic rock track, but nothing wrong with it. You're All I Need, well, it's pretty good. Then we get a live version of Jailhouse Rock, that's alright as well. Very solid album. This is when they were really at the height of their popularity. It's got some great tracks on here. An album of the time, but it's still one of the best albums of the time. So I'm going to give this an RTO ranking of 7.8. So coming in at number 1 is the album first album I ever really heard by Mötley Crüe. It's their second album, released in 1983, and it is Shout at the Devil. And the first track on this is In the Beginning. It's just a lot of intros, a lot of waffle, but then it goes into Shout at the Devil. Wow, iconic track, iconic riff from Mick Mars, and the guitar solo is brilliant, and Vince Neil is on absolute fire. I love this track, great track. Looks That Kill, great metal rock track of the time. Driving riffs, a great bass line. Then we got a track called Bastard, sorry about the swearing. It's got some nice riffs in it though, it is absolutely brilliant. Then we got God Bless the Children of the Beast. This is a little instrumental thing from Mick Mars, and it's got a nice little guitar bit from him. Then they do a version of Beatles' Helter Skelter. It's not a bad version, it's a really heavy version. I love the riffs in this, how they've done it. Then you've got a great vocal from Vince on that. It's a terrific track. Red Hot, great drumming from Tommy on this. Solid drums, great bass line. Then we've got my favourite track by Mötley Crüe ever, Too Young to Fall in Love. It's absolutely brilliant. Certainly their best track ever. Definitely number 1 in my top 10. Knock 'Em Dead Kid, more solid rock. Great track. 10 Seconds to Love, really, really good. Absolutely brilliant guitar work here from Mick. The album ends up with a great power ballad. Probably my favourite power ballad by Mötley Crüe, Danger. Absolutely brilliant. This is a great album. I like it because it's raw, heavy metal rock and roll. It's just a great album, I think. I mean, the Beatles cover's brilliant, and it's got my favourite track on it of all time. That's probably why it's my number 1, and it's the first album I ever got by Mötley Crüe. So I shall give it an RTO ranking of 8 out of 10. There we go, some Mötley Crüe. A band that, in the day, I loved them. I think everybody loved a bit of Mötley Crüe. But I think there's one of them bands that didn't grow up, and now it's all a mess, which is such a shame. But there you go, that's rock and roll for you. They've never been they've always got themselves into pickles over the years, this band. So I think it's time for them to say, you've done your bit, you've made a great contribution to rock and roll, but hang your boots up, lads, and get remembered for what you put out in the 80s. Okay, I'll be back very shortly for a classic album, and we're going to look at a member of Deep Purple who made only one album with them, and that's Mr. Tommy Bolin and his great album Teaser. So we'll have a look at that. So bye for now.